Shalom Aleichem, everybody. We are up to Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, the top line in Masechta Shevuos. So, yesterday we saw that Rav Dimi b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan tried to define what is a Shevuos Sheker, what is a Shevuos Shav, the difference between them, and what the Makar, what the Hasra Edom have to give on each one. And of course, Kainamis, Nedarim. So if you take a look at the chart we have over here, Rav Dimi's chart, Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he says, Achalti v'lo echalti, a Shavua on the past, whether I ate or I didn't eat, that's in the category of Shevuos Shav, and the Edom have to give Asra, when they watch somebody violating that Shavua, being over on it, they have to say, Lo yisisa shem Hashem alekecha lashav. It's a Shevuos Shav. It's l'sha'avar. And sheker is lahaba. Eichel v'lo eichel. Edom have to give the asra v'lo yisashavu b'shmi l'shaker. And kainomois are nedarim. A person makes a neder and he's about to violate his neder. Then the pasuk is liyachal dvarei. Now the Gemara had a kasha yesterday. How could you say that shav and sheker are that different? One is past tense, one is future tense. What about the brisa that says shav v'sheker echoden, that it's davar echod? How could you split them apart? So the teretz of today, first line, v'yiba yisema, what's davar echod? Kishem shemevi karban al sheker, kach mevi karban al shav. Just like he brings a karban on sheker, he brings a karban on shav. V'Rabbi Akiva hi d'mechayev l'sha'over kalahaba. And Rabbi Akiva holds that you're chayiv on a Shavua l'sha'avar like lahaba. So that is why it says davar echad. But avada, with regard to carbon, they're one. Right? It's machlokas, big machlokas, whether you bring a carbon or of the yard if you violate a Shavua l'sha'avar. Because the pasuk says lahar l'heitiv. Rabbi Akiva is the one who says you also bring l'sha'avar. So that's the davar echad. That brisa is saying, like Rabbi Akiva, that they're one with regard to karbanis l'sha'avar and lahaba. Meisavei, ezi shvias shav, what's called the Shevuos Shav? Nishba l'shanas as yedua la'odam. Anytime you make a Shavua, to change what's yedua la'odam. Right? So here, I'm learning out of a Masechta Sanhedrin Makas Shevuos. Somebody swears, I swear I'm holding a Yavamas. Right? That's a Shevuos Shav. Nishba l'shanas yedua la'odam. You take one look, it's Shevuos. Shevuos Sheker, what's a Shevuos Sheker? Nishba l'hachlif. You swore to be machlif, to be meshana, what happened? Which means, he says, achalti, and he really didn't eat in the past. Or he says, lo yachalti, and he ate. So what do you see from here? That a Shevuos Sheker is on past tense. It's Kashmir Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi said that Shevuos Sheker is on future. Gemara says, ema nishba machlif. So you have to answer that, that brisa he's bringing by Shevuos Sheker is Nishbo Machlif, which means future tense. He swore that he is going to eat and Machlif, and future tense he's not eating. So it's not a kasha on Rav Dimi. Okay. Ki also Ravin, Omer Rabbi Yirmi, Omer Bavo, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, when Ravin came, he said B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan differently. Argues in Rav Dimi the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Two Talmidim said at the same shiur, they each learned something else. Or maybe different shiurim. Kiyasu Ravin Omer Rabbi Yirmi Bavo Rabbi Yochanan achalti v'lo yachalti sheker. I guess different shiurim because Ravin says b'shem Rabbi Yirmi b'shem Bavo b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. He didn't hear directly from Rabbi Yochanan, so I stand corrected. But he heard it b'shem Rabbi Yochanan differently. Achalti v'lo yachalti sheker. That past tense is a Shevuos Sheker v'zara symbol is shav b'shmi l'shaker. Oicha v'lo yoichel oiver b'leyachal dvarei. Future tense is just a lav on leyachal dvarei. The Ezi Shevuos Shav, what's a Shevuos Shav? Nishba l'shanas yidur la'odam. If he changes what's known to man. He swears that this table, which is plastic, is made out of wood. So just to put up the chart, so far we had Rav Dimi's chart, now we have Ravin. Ravin says, Nishba l'shanas yidua, that's a Shav. That's l'sisa. Person's about to make a Shevuos Shav, Edom have to warn him from the pasuk of l'sisa. Achalti v'lo yachalti. That's a Shevuos Sheker past tense, and that azhara, that hasra, comes from Leisashavu, and oichel v'lo yoichel is a lav of liyachal dvarei. Omer Rav Papa, Hoder Bavohu, Lav Befei Rishitmer. This memra of Rabbi Vohu is not befeirish. In other words, he learned it. Rabbi Vohu is the final leg in the list of who heard it from Rabbi Yochanan. He was the one who heard it directly from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Ravin quoted Rabbi Yirmiyah, heard it from Rabbi Vohu, or Rabbi Vohu heard it from Rabbi Yochanan. So Gemara says, Rabbi Papa says, Rabbi Vohu didn't hear directly from Rabbi Yochanan in the shiur. He was able to deduce it from a different statement Rabbi Yochanan made. Oh, what's that statement? Rabbi Yochanan said b'shem Rabbi Yehuda. Mishum Rabbi Yosei Aglili, the Heilige Tana Rabbi Yosei Aglili, Kol loy says the Shabbat Torah, lav sheyesh b'maisa loiken olav. Any lav in the Torah, if it has a maisa, if it involves an action, you get malchus. She'ein b'maisa, ein loiken olav. But if it doesn't involve an action, then you don't get malchus on it. Chutz, except three exceptions. Nishba, umeimer mekalas chaveira b'Hashem. Except for somebody who violates his Shevuos, umeimer, somebody who does Tmura. Tmura means you exchange the kedusha of one animal from one animal and you put it onto another animal, which does not work. You're over an alav leyechlifenu v'leyomer, and avada, the animal that you are makdish, you try to be meimer on, both are hektish, doesn't even work. And finally, the last one is a mekalul es chaver b'Hashem, Rashi says b'shem hamiyuchad. Right, you use a certain shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to curse a friend. Right, those are the three exceptions that even though it's just a kimas v'sayim, it's just a kimas peh, you're not really doing a maisa, still you are chayev agam, it's a lav she'en b'maisa. Now before we unpack the nishba, which is our sugya, Tosfos asks, Tema, Tosfos asks a kasha. What do you mean? This is Rabbi Yochanan quoting Rabbi Yosei Aglili. Rabbi Yochanan himself in Bab Metzia says, there's another exception. Which one is that? L'sachsim shar b'dishay. Right, l'sachsim usually is understood when you put a muzzle on an animal's mouth, b'shas it's threshing, so you're holding it back from eating. So that involves an action, right? You're putting a muzzle on the animal's mouth. But what if you didn't put the muzzle on? What if you just, every time the animal wanted to eat, you yelled, "Hep, don't eat! Hep, don't eat!" Right? That's just a dibur ba'alma. It's a lav she'en b'maisa. And Rabbi Yochanan says that's included. You are mechuyev malchus on it. So you see, there's another exception on lav she'en b'maisa. Another case of lav she'en b'maisa loikan olav. Another case is when you have kalayim, behemoths that shor v'chamor yagdav, l'sach shor v'chamor yagdav, and instead of plowing with them b'maisa, you're maniged b'kol, right? You're basically leading it with your voice. Let's go, yeah, whatever language you use when you try to get them to move. So that's also malchus, even though it's a lav she'en b'maisa, it's just dibur ba'alma. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say chutz nishba meimer mekalas chaver b'Hashem? There are other exceptions. You see other lav she'en b'maisas that are like an olav. Tosfos answers that over there it's different because it's dibur that is oisa maisa, dibur that leads to a maisa. Right, the behema moves away, or the shor v'chamor chayrish, they're plowing together through your dibur. So that is more likely to be considered a lav sheyesh b'maisa. Masha'enka nishba meimar mekalas chaver b'Hashem, you're doing nothing except for a maisa. There's nothing else. So now the Gemara is going to unpack nishba. Nishba minolan. How do I know that a shvuah gets malchus? Hagam it's a lav she'en b'maisa. Where do we know that from? Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Reb Shimon ben Yochai. Right, we just had like Baimer. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Reb Shimon ben Yochai, Omar Kra, the Torah says, Le'sisa Hashem Hashem L'kach Lashov, Ki Le'naka Bezan Shamayla Menaka Noisai, Vad Shemata Malka Noisai Menaka Noisai. It says that you're not allowed to swear Hashem's name in vain, because Ki Lo Yanaka, you can't come clean from that kind of Aveira. So what does it mean you can't come clean? Which means Bezin Shalmaila can't clean you up. You're dirty from the Aveira. But Bezin Shalmata could clean you up through a couple of lashes, Malchus. So you see from this pasuk, Leinaka, the dik of Leinaka, only Bezin Shalmaila can't clean you, but Bezin Shalmata could. So you see you get Malchus and a lav she'en b'maisa on Shevuos Shav. Amalei Papa Abaye, what do you see Bezin Shalmata can give you Malchus on that? Maybe the term means loinaka klal. You don't get cleansed at all. Maybe even Bezin Shalmata can't clean you and you don't get malchus. How do you not get malchus on that? Gemara says, Iksiv kiloyinaka kedeka amrit. If you just want to say kiloyinaka, then you're right. Nobody can clean him up. Ashta dechsiv kelinaka Hashem. Hashem udeina menake. Only Hashem. Bezer shel Maila can't clean up. Bezer shel Mata, Malkin oisai menake oisai. After Hashem says, I'm not going to clean you, but Bezer shel Mata can give you lashes and clean up that aveira. So from here you see that a nishba, Shevuos shav, gets malchus hagam, it's a lav shem b'maisa. Klinaka Hashem, but Bezer shel Mata gives you malchus. Asks the Gemara, Ashkna Shevuos shav. I understand Shevuos shav gets malchus. Again, what's a Shevuos shav? Classic Shevuos shav is, Mishnah's going to say later, nishba l'shana seidu la'adam. Shevuos sheker minolon. How do I know that includes a Shevuos sheker? The Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan didei Omar. Rabbi Yochanan himself says, it says in the pasuk, Lashav, Shtieble Omar. It says twice Lashav in that pasuk. In Me'ena Inyi L'Shuas Shav, why do I need the second Lashav? I already have the first Lashav to teach you get Malchus. So if I don't need it for Lashav, Tanayuin, L'Shuas Sheker. So then it teaches you Shuas Sheker, it also gets Malchus Agam, it's a Lav She'en B'maisa. Oh, here's Rabbi Gold comes in. Here's where he deduces it from Rabbi Yochanan's statement. Hi Shevuos sheker. This Shevuos sheker that Rabbi Yochanan was talking about, that is included in the shav from the second lashav, you get malchus on. Hey Chadami, what kind of Shevuos sheker are we talking about? If you're going to tell me the Shevuos sheker is, he said I'm not going to eat in the future, and he ended up eating, I don't need a pasuk for that. Lav sheyesh by maisahu. You violated your shvua through a maisa. He said I'm not going to eat, and you ate. I don't need a second lashav to teach me. Kiloinaka Hashem. Bezer Shamayla can't clean your Bezer Shamata gives you malchus for that. It's a lav sheyesh b'maisa. Kol hatirikula lav sheyesh b'maisa gets malchus. Ve'el the omar Shevuos she'oichel v'lo yachal. So just turn it around. Future tense. He said I'm gonna eat, and he didn't end up eating. Hi miloiko. That doesn't get malchus. Ve'etmer Shevuos she'oichel kikar zoyim ve'over hayom v'lo yachal. Rabbi Yochanan, ding, 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 Rabbi Yochanan himself. Ain't a loika. Rabbi Yochanan, no, ain't a loika. Mishum to have a lav sheva ma'isa. V'cholav sheva ma'isa ain't loika no lav. Rabbi Yochanan himself says in that case you don't get malchus on. So how could you say Rabbi Yochanan is the one who includes it from lashav, the second lashav, that you get malchus on that? That can't be the case. We spoke about it in Makkos, at the end of Makkos. We had this Gemara come up over there that Rish Lakish says it's a safek because anytime Adam will come and warn you, right, and say, make sure that you keep to your shvuah. It could be that you're going to eat it later in the day. It could be you're not going to eat it. It's a suffix. It's a suffix whether he's going to violate the asra and b'kai gavna. It's lo yishma asra, and therefore you can't get malchus on it. But either way, what do you see from Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning is it's lav she'en b'maisa. And lav she'en b'maisa in such a case ain't loikin olav. So you can't tell me that's Rabbi Yochanan meant to include in the lashav that you get malchus on a Shevuos sheker. That's not the Shevuos sheker. So what is the Shevuos sheker Rabbi Yochanan is talking about? You get malchus even though it's ein b'maisa. V'omer bavo teiba chalti v'lo yachalti. Must be the case is achalti v'lo yachalti. He swore past tense that I ate and he really didn't eat, or vice versa. Gemara asks, a Maishno. So, question is, how did Rabbi Yochanan know to include from the second lashav a Shevuos sheker of achalti v'lo yachalti? Maybe the inclusion of the second lashav is coming to teach us for a case of Shevuos she'oichel v'lo yachal. They're both a lav she'en b'maisa. How do you know to include this type of lav she'en b'maisa in the second lashav, other than the other lav she'en b'maisa of oichel v'lo yachal? Future tense. Amar Rava, so Rava said, "Befeirish ripsa Torah Shevuos sheker doima lashav." It's mafurish the Torah's marba Shevuos sheker similar to a Shevuos shav. Mashav l'sha'ovar. Just like the classic Shevuos shav is always past tense. Why? Because if I'm swearing to you right now that this is not a Shevuos, this is a Yevamis, right? Then as soon as it comes out of my mouth, it's already, this is a Shevuos before my Shevuah, right? This is a Masech Sanhedrin before me. It's past tense, right? So just like a Shevuos shav is always l'sha'avar, right? I don't have to do anything or not do anything in order for me to violate my Shevuah. I'm violating my Shevuah as soon as I utter it because it's already happened, right? It's not a Yevamis. So just like Shevuos shav, the classic Shevuos shav is l'sha'avar, av sheker nami l'sha'avar. So too a Shevuos sheker that is included in the lashav to teach you, you get malchus on that, would be a case of l'sha'avar, which is achalti v'lo yachalti. So that's how Rabbi Gold learned it from Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, he didn't hear Rabbi Yochanan say mafurish, lehedya, that a Shevuos sheker is achalti v'lechalti. What he heard was that Shevuos sheker is nisraba from the second lashav. And what kind of Shevuos sheker is nisraba from Shevuos shav? Anything that's l'sha'ovar, because it's similar to Shevuos shav. Okay. Eisavei Rabbi Yirmi l'Rabavo. Rabbi Yirmi asked from Bavo, Shevuos shelo kikar zu. Right, this Mishnah later in the parak. Shevuos lo yechlenu, Shevuos lo yechlenu, makes the same Shevuah 3 times. I'm not going to eat this kicker. Va'achla, then he ends up eating it. Ein chayav le'achas. He's only chayav once. Why? Rashi explains, because as soon as you make the first Shevuah, then you have a mitzvah to mekayim the Shevuah. The second Shevuah is a Shevuah on Dvar Mitzvah. Right? You already mush b'vayimid on it. You already made a Shevuah, so you have to keep that Shevuah. And ein Shevuah, chal al Shevuah. You can't have a Shevuah bichal on another Shevuah, especially if that Shevuah is l'kayim as a mitzvah. So Mamela, you're only over on one Shevuah. Even though you made it 3 times, the same thing. Zuhi, now the Mishnah adds a line. Zuhi Shevuos bita shechayoven as doinu makis, v'al shegigasa korban oila v'yayred. This is the Shevuah. This is Zuhi. The Shevuos bita, the chayev, malchus b'mezid, and a korban oila v'yayred b'shaykik. So now the question is, Zuhi, anytime it's Zuhi, like, whoa, Zuhi, this is it! Zuhi l'mutamai. What's it coming to exclude? Yeah? Lav. L'muta chalti v'le'chalti, the lucky. What's the Mishnah coming to exclude? Which case? Chalti v'le'chalti, you don't get malchus on. Oh, who's that a kasha on? It's a kasha on Rabbi Vo and Rabbi Yochanan. Because Rabbi Vo said in Rabbi Yochanan, he was marba from the second lashav, chalti v'le'chalti, you do get malchus on it, just like lashav, right? You get malchus on it. So it's a kasha. You have a dik from another Mishnah that says in that case you don't get malchus. So Gemara says no. Loi. Lamiyuta chalti v'leichalti mikarbon. No, it's mamayit b'shoigig. If you're over on that kind of shvu b'shoigig, you don't bring a carbon. Zuhi only in a case of shvu shaloi oichel, the future tense. V'achal, that's when al sheyigasa carbon oil of a yored. That's when you bring a carbon oil of a yored. V'chalti, v'lo yechalti, past tense, loy, Rabbi Shmuel, and this is Rabbi Shmuel, the omen chayv al-osad lavoi. Shmuel's famous shita throughout Shevuos we had is that you're only chayiv on lahora or lahetiv. Carbon oil of a yored, Shevuos bitoy. Right, nefesh kishol vatmas v'sayim is only on lahaba. La-osad lavoi, that's mafurish in the Torah. He doesn't hold the drushes we're going to see later on, Chavav Chav Zayin, in the Masechta, the Bekiva Darshans even on past tense. He says you only chayiv a carbon on asad lavai. So Zuhi, this is the case where you chayiv a carbon, but not on a chalti v'lechalti. Aval milko, lucky. But of Adam, you get malchus on violating even a past tense shavua because of Rabbi Yochanan. Lashav lashav. It's included in lashav lashav. That's learned from lashav lashav. So it's not a kash on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is mar b'chalti v'lechalti that you get malchus on it from lashav lashav. But a carbon, that's Zuhi, only b'shoigig. You only bring a carbon for Shavua Shaloyach Lenava Achal, but not on past tense. The Gemara says, slow down. Let's learn the Seifa of that same Mishnah. Mishnah said, what's a Shavua Shav? Somebody is Nishbel Lashanas Sayidu ala Adam. Right? The person is Bashana, something that's known to man. Rashi says, he says in an Omad Shal Evan, it says Shal Zav. Right? He says in a stone Omad, on a beam, that on a pillar, he says, it's gold, but everybody sees it's Evan. So the Mishnah says, Zuhi Shevuos Shav, that's the type of Shevuos Shav, Shechayovan al Zdoina Malchus, Va'al Shigigasa, Potter. But B'shoigig, you're Potter on that kind of Shevuos Shav, right? Because it's not included in the parsha of Carbon Oil of Yerid, Shevuos Bita, it's a Shevuos Shav. Gets Malchus. Ki Lenaka Hashem, we learned in Namad Aleph, right? That's where Rabbi Yochanan, Gemara Darshans, Rabbi Yudim Shem, Rabbi Yisrael Glili. But, Rabbi Yochanan, excuse me, right? That gets malchus, but on Shigigasa is potter. So the Gemara says again, Zuhi lemuta mai. When it says Zuhi, this is the type of Shevuos shav. The chayiv b'mezid malchus and b'shagi your potter. What's it coming to Zuhi lemuta mai? My level lemuta chalti v'lechalti l'loy loki. So here you have another diak that Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Vo b'shem Rabbi Yochanan is wrong. That you don't get malchus on a chalti v'lechalti. So the Gemara says no, loy. Don't be medaik like that. Medaik differently. Zui dal sheyigasa potter me carbon, aval chalti v'lechalti sheyigasa chayiv carbon. You're a potter from a carbon on a Shevuos Shav, but echalti v'lo echalti, you'll be chayiv a carbon. Rabbi Akiva, he the mechayiv l'shav kla haba. And it'll have to be Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says that included in the parasha of Shevuos Bita, you learn from a drasha, not just lahor leitiv in the future tense, but also in the past tense, you also chayiv a carbon. Gemara says, whoa, slow down. Amar Reish Rabbi Shmueli. To answer the diak in the ratio, you said it must be Rabbi Shmuel. And for Rabbi Yochanan. And now, the Seifa, Rabbi Akiva, to answer the diak in the Seifa, you have to come up to Rabbi Akiva. So usually we don't like doing that. We don't like splitting up the same Mishnah and saying the same Mishnah, the Reisha is one man Amar and the Seifa is another man Amar. We usually like to stay consistent and say it's the same Tana. So Gemara says, you're right. Let's just say Kula Rabbi Akiva, the entire Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva. So the entire Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva. What's the Zuhi and the Reisha? For Reisha lav l'muti echalti v'lo echalti mikarbon. It's not being mamayat echalti v'echalti mikarbon because l'sha'over. Because Rabbi Akiva holds l'sha'over yichayiv mikarbon. If it's Rabbi Akiva, you should be chayiv on that too. Elo, the Zuhi and the Reishas come to mamayat l'muta oichel v'lo ochal mimalkus aval karbon mechayiv. It's coming to mamayat a case of oichel v'lo ochal mimalkus aval karbon mechayiv. Which, by the way, stims with Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said in that case, it's lav shem b'maisa. So that would stim very well. Right? Because that's not included in the lashav. Oichel v'lo yachal. It's only echalti v'lo echalti, so it's all good. Gemara says, a Maishna, how do you know to be mamayat, a case of oichel v'lo yachal, that you don't get malchus? Maybe you mamayat the case of echalti v'lo echalti and ask a kashan Rabbi Yochanan. Gemara says, no, mistabri koy b'lahaba, mamayat lahaba. What's the Reisha talking about? The Reisha is talking about a case of lahaba, future tense. Right? It says, guy says, Shevuos shaloi oichel v'achal. It's lahaba. Zuhi Shevuos bit shechayv v'shavas den makis v'gos ha-karbon el v'yaret. So Zuhi is going in a case of lahaba. So if you're going in a case of lahaba, mistabra, koy b'lahaba, mamayit lahaba, koy b'lahaba, mamayit l'sha'avar. Karbon l'sha'avar, it's the bitmiya. You want to be mamayit l'sha'avar case when you're talking about a lahaba case. That we don't do. So mamela, it's not a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Avo b'shem Rabbi Yochanan from the Mishnah, and Rabbi Avo b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, the way Ravan quoted Rabbi Yochanan b'shem Rabbi Yochanan is, again, achalti v'lo echalti, past tense is Shevuos sheker, you have to warn him from l'shav b'shmi l'shaker. Future tense is alav of le'achal dvarei. And the Shevuos shav is nishbel hashanas yadu la'odam, and the aveira is from Lesisa. Okay. Zog the Gemara weiter. We had in the Mishnah a machloikis between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim, a very important machloikis. Rabbi Akiva said that if a guy makes a shvuah, I'm not going to eat, and then he eats, how much does he have to eat in order to be chayiv the carbon? Let's just say it's b'shaykik. Kiva says, even if he eats a kolshu, he's chayiv. Doesn't have to eat a kazayas. Usually, when you violate isura achila, the Torah, you eat nevelas, treifas, shkatzim, or muslim, any isura Torah, you have to eat a kazayas. Rabbi Kiva says, it's only a kolshu. In this case of oichel v'shaloi, he says it makes a shvuah, shaloi oichel, and then he eats, it's only a kolshu. So the Gemara asks like this, Ibailu. Rabbi Akiva b'chal HaTorah kula kerb Shimon Svil l'mechayev v'mashu? Is it true that Rabbi Akiva really argues with the Chachamim in Kol HaTorah kula? And there is a precedent for it. There's a precedent for it. Rabbi Shimon says like that. Rabbi Shimon says you're mechayev v'mashu. The Tanya, where do we find this? Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Shimon, I'm a kol shu l'makas, that you're chayev a kol shu, a malchus on a kol shu, on any Yisurei Torah. V'la'amr kazayis eli in carbon. The only time you need a kazayis is v'shoygik to bring a carbon. But b'mezid, if you eat a kol shu, any Yisurei Torah, any Yisurei macholas asuras, even a kol shu you get malchus. And Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon, that it's not just here by Shevuos shaloi oichel v'ochal kol shu you're chayev. Even if you eat a bales of treifis, you're also chayev. Why doesn't he argue b'kol HaTorah kula? Why does he only choose to argue in this case? Or bedinu the b'yifluga ba'alma. Really, Rabbi Akiva should be arguing the Chachamim in all other cases. The reason why we bring down the machlikas specifically with regard to Shevuah, to teach you the koyach of the Chachamim. The afal gav the ikal meimar. Because even though there is a special svara to say over here, Hoyul meforish chayiv, stam nami chayiv. Since the Chachamim themselves agree that if a guy's mefarish and he says Shevuos shelo yochel kol shehu, he says clearly, berachol bitchaktana, tongue in cheek, he says, I'm not going to eat even a kol shehu, and then he eats a kol shehu, Chacham says chayiv and a kol shehu. Right, so Mamela, if you see that he's chayiv and a kol shehu, if he's mefarish, so maybe you say stam nami chayiv, even if you didn't say kol shehu, you should also be chayiv. Kamash melon, still, the patri. The Chachamim say he's potter unless he eats a kazayas if he makes a shvuah shlo echel stam. That's what they're arguing over here. To teach you the koich d'Rabbanan that over here you're not chayiv until you eat a kazayas. I got there's a svar to say differently, but really as far as the Rabbi Akiva is concerned, he argues b'chala Torah kula, it's universal machlekes. Oidilma, or maybe no. Rabbi Akiva maybe ba'almik Rabbanan severely. Maybe he agrees to the Rabbanan that you always need kazayas to be chayiv by mecholas asuras. The reason over here he argues is because there's a special svara. Hoyel, since you see him a farish chayiv, if a guy would say outright shvuah shelo echel kol shehu, he'd be chayiv. Stam, so maybe if he doesn't say kol shehu also, stam shvuah shelo echel, nami chayiv, there's a svara to be chayiv even if he says stam. Why? Because you see that the Isser Achila is not Neveya, doesn't come out of the Cheftza of the Meichel. It's coming because you're violating your Dibur. That's why if he's Mefarish, right, he's Chayiv even on a Kolshu. Because the Chiyav, the Isser is, don't violate your Dibur. And as soon as you eat a Kolshu, you're already violating your Dibur. It's a special svar over here. It's a local Machlaikas. It's not a universal Machlaikas at all. He has a special svar to be mechayiv by kolshu over here, because hoyel mefarish chayiv. That shows that the isser is the violation of the dibur. So even bestam, you're already violating your dibur as soon as you eat a kolshu. Hagam, you didn't say mefurish, but you said shvuah shelo echel. So that's the shaila. What's Rabbi Akiva's opinion b'chol Torah kula? That's the shaila at hand. Toshema says the Gemara. I'll prove it to you from the Mishnah itself. The Omru Loyli Rabbi Akiva. What was the Chachamim steiner back to Rabbi Akiva? They said, Heichan Matzinu. Where else in Kol HaTorah Kula do we find Ba'eichel Kol Shu Chayiv Shezeh Chayiv? We never find like that anywhere in the Torah that you Chayiv in a Kol Shu. Them Isa. And if it's true, Rabbi Akiva argues everywhere else. Leima Lahu should answer them. Ano B'chol HaTorah Kula Rabbi Shimon severely. I also hold like Rabbi Shimon everywhere else. What do you mean you ask me Heichan Matzinu? Everywhere I hold like Rabbi Shimon. Says the Gemara. That's not a raya. Could be Taki holds like Rav Shimon b'chala Torah kula. The reason why I didn't answer them like that is because l'divrayim d'Rabbanan ka'amarlu. He's saying, even according to you that you argue with me b'chala Torah kula, but al kapanim l'didi b'chala Torah kula k'shemon esvila. I Taki hold like Rav Shimon everywhere. But l'didchu, but according to you, even according to you, oidul l'miyah, please admit to me, hoil mefarish chayiv, stam nami chayiv. Over here's a special svar to be mechayiv and a kolshu, because you see him mefarish when he says clearly shvuah shelo echel kolshu is chayiv. So you see it's because of the violation of the dibur. So be maida even by stam, you should also be chayiv. Va'omru le Rabbanan loy. Rabbanan said no. No, it's no different. Mefarish is something else. We're supposed to speak about it later. Next daf. But stam, it's like every machalas asuris and yida kazayis. So you still don't have a raya. Rabbi Akiva holds b'chala Torah kula. Right? Because the Mishnah isn't such a raya. Could be l'divrein d'Rabbanan kamilu. So the Gemara brings another raya. Toshama, Rabbi Akiva says, Nozer sheshar pita bayayin, a nozer who's not allowed to drink wine. And he soaks his bread into wine, v'yesh ba. And between the bread and the wine, you have kedei l'tzaref kazayis, you can be l'tzaref kazayis, then he's chayiv. Oh, Frag Gemara, v'sokadaitach ba'al mekar Shimon sevirlei. If Rabbi Akiva was like Rav Shimon, b'chala Torah kula by all machalas asuras that a kosher is chayiv, laman l'tzaref. Why does Rabbi Akiva say, oh, if you have between the pas and the yayin, you have a kazayis, then you're chayiv. What do you mean? You don't need a tziruf. V'oid, another raya. Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah later. Shevuos shelo oichel v'ochel neveils ha'trefus kotzim v'matzim chayiv. Guy makes a shvu, he's not going to eat neveils ha'trefus v'shkotzim v'matzim, he's chayiv. He's still chayiv, even though he made a shvu on a dvar Torah, and he's mushba v'oimet, we'll see about it later. He's chayiv. Reb Shimon Poiter, Reb Shimon Paters. Why is Reb Shimon Pater? So Reb Shimon Poiter because Rashi says Shemush b'voy Mar Sinai. He's saying Mush b'voy Medavad the shvu is not chal. V'avinun ba. Reb Shimon is right. A guy makes a shvu. I'm not going to eat the veils of treifus. He's Mush b'voy Mar Sinai. How could the shvu be chal? Why would he chayiv? V'avinun ba. My chayiv Mush b'Mar Sinai. According to Rabbanan, why is he chayiv? So there's a couple of terutzim here. Rav Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan the Amr Tarvayu. Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, who all say Tarvayu means both. Some are erasing the word Tarvayu because Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan are Telosayu. There are three. Okay, so Rav and Shmuel Tarvayu Dvarim Amatarim and Dvarim Asurim. The idea of koilel is that any time, you include Dvarim Amatarim, items that the Shavua could be chal on, and then they drag along the items that the Shavua can't be chal on, and that's why in this case Tanakama holds that if you're nishba, make a Shavua, shelo yoichel, which includes all types of food, right? Everything, even Dvarim Amatarim, and then you go in the Velas Treifus, you're chayiv on eating Velas Treifus because that's Shavua. How can it be chal yimush b'vayim? There it is, because that Shavua was koil Dvarim Amatarim, and that's how it was chal on the Dvarim Asurim. Shlokish answers differently. How is it chal according to Nakama if you're mush b'vayimid? Shlokish Amar iyata moitze elo iba mefarish chatzi shiur v'aliba derabanan. A chatzi shiur min ha'Torah is mutter. According to Shlokish at least. V'yoichan says chatzi shiur also min ha'Torah. But Shlokish himself l'shitasai holds chatzi shiur is mutter min ha'Torah, and that's why even if he says a shavua shelo oichel nevela, even if it's not koil, right? Shlokish argues on the whole idea of koil, so he needs a different teretz. He says koil is not going to help you. So has the Shavua chal? Teretz is you're mefarish chatzi shiur. You're saying Shavua shelo oichel chatzi shiur, even less than a kazayas. Min ha'Torah, eating the veis trevish gutzim or masim, according to Shlokish, is mutter if it's less than a kazayas. So then it could be chal. So ibn mefarish chatzi shiur v'aliba derabanan. Ibestam v'aliba derakiva. Domar odam oiser atzim b'chol shu. Or maybe bestama, and it's Rabbi Akiva that says that a person is answering himself b'kolshu even if he's not mafarish. So 1 second. And if you'll tell me Rabbi Akiva holds like Reb Shimon, that even the velas, a treifus, shkotzim or masim, you're chayv a kolshu min ha'Torah, so oibazoi kolshu nami mishbu marsin. It's not going to help you to say that the Shavua was only in a kolshu. How's it going to help you? If Rabbi Akiva holds like Reb Shimon, then you're already mush b'voyim and a kol shu also, so it's ein shvu chal shvu on that, right? Elo lav shma mino ba'alma karabonas v'ila shma mino. So when the fact that Rish Lakish uses Rabbi Akiva to explain, how the shvu is chal and aveils treifus, he uses Rabbi Akiva saying that bastam it's on chatzi shiur, and that's why it could be chal and aveils treifus. Must be an aveils treifus. No iser of chatzi shiur. That means Rabbi Akiva holds b'chol ha'terakula, you need a kazayas. And that's the final raya on the shaila in our Mishnah between the Rabbi Akiva and the Chacham Machlekes. Rabbi Akiva argues in the Chacham just over here, it's a local Machlekes, or universal Machlekes. The Gemara comes out that Shema Mina, it's a local Machlekes. Rabbi Akiva does not agree with his Heilige Talmud Reb Shimon Bar Yochai that b'chol ha'terakula machal ha'asur is chayv and a kolshu. It's only over here a special svara by Shavua, because you see there's a svara, hoyle mefarish chayev, since you see that if you mefarish and a chatzi shiur be chayev, kol shu nami chayev, it's a isser, a whole separate isser of violating your dibur, and therefore it's appropriate to be mechayev and a chatzi shiur.